Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting of the 16th of July. My name is Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of the Panel of Administrators. I'd like to start with introductions this afternoon. My colleague panel member, Mr Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair.
And we will move and second apologies for Miguel Belmar, who is on leave currently. So I'm happy to move his absence.
Seconded.
Seconded. All in favour? Carried. And I'd like to welcome our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Glenn Patterson. Good afternoon. And we're joined by a number of senior staff here today, starting with Jen Bednar, Director Customer and Corporate Services, Steve Coldham, Director Community Life, and James Collins, Director City Planning and Infrastructure. We're supported this afternoon by Nicole Road from Governance and also Tamara from AV, and we have a number of other senior staff from Council who I also welcome this afternoon. And I welcome all of you in the gallery. Good afternoon. I'd like to start with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and community of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. Now move to the confirmation of minutes for the Council meeting held on the 24th of June. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I'll move those minutes.
And I'll second those. All in favour? Carried. Declaration of interests. I confirm that I have considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and have no conflicts to declare. Do my panel colleagues or any officers have any matters to declare?
I have nothing to declare.
Thank you, Mr Boardman.
Chair, I do have one to declare in relation to a general interest associated with item 5.9. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Patterson. We'll note that. I now move to public question time. There are a number of public questions and I'll hand over to our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Patterson, to work through those public questions.
Thank you, Chair. In accordance with Rule 65(11) of our governance rule, any person who submits a public question must be in the gallery at the time the question and response is due to be read. If a person is not present in the gallery, the question will not be read. However, it will still be recorded in the minutes of the Council meeting and a copy of the written response will be provided. The first question today has been received from Michelle Crowther. Can I confirm whether they or a representative are in the gallery today? They are. Thank you. So the subject is the Casey Maternal and Child Health Service, and the question is, I'm following up on my question from February 2024 when administrators stated the full maternal and child health service was restored in Casey. Many mums attending my physiotherapy clinic have again expressed their frustration about MCH appointments being cancelled by the Council, long delays on the phone to book visits and difficulty booking subsequent toddler appointments due to no availability. What are the statistics on how many Casey kids complete the full 10 MCH visits that other Victorian children receive? And Mr Coldham will respond to that question, Chair.
Thank you for your question. Council's Maternal Child Health Service continues to see children for all key age and stage visits. There's been a gradual improvement in the participation rates for the older children and toddlers. Unfortunately, workforce shortages and staff illness through the winter period continue to impact on the number of available visits, and we acknowledge that the availability of appointments for older children and toddlers is still not at the desired level. With a recent improvement to the phone system, waiting time for callers on hold have reduced, and callers now have the option to request a callback from the service rather than wait on hold. Council is required to use a maternal child health software determined by the Victorian Government, and this program unfortunately does not have the ability to report on the comparison data that you have requested. Thank you.
Questions 2 and 3 have been received from Stefan Koopman. Can I confirm whether they or a representative are here today? They are not, so we'll move on to questions 4 and 5 that have been received from Hayley Perry. Again, is that person or a representative present here today? They are not, so we'll move to question 6, which has been received from Mr. Ray Heathcote. Are they? Mr. Heathcote is here, thank you. The question relates to redundancies at Casey Ark. The question: in recent change of management at Casey Ark, why did some current employees have contracts cancelled? In particular, 2 daytime cleaners who are doing a great job. Their jobs should have been protected. What was the point of this change if it meant unemployment for current workers? And again, Mr. Colden will respond.
Thank you for your question. As a result of an extensive tender process, Align Leisure were appointed to manage Casey's leisure facilities from 1st July 2024. Pleasingly, over 560 people, or 95% of the previous workforce, were retained and placed into similar roles as part of the transition to the new provider. To protect the privacy of those impacted staff, unfortunately, we're unable to disclose publicly the details related to their individual situations.
Questions 7 and 8 have been received from Louis Describes. Again, can I confirm whether they or a representative are here today? And they are not. So we'll move to questions 9 and 10 that have been submitted by Tiffany Ralph. Again, are they or a representative here? No. Move to question 11 and 12. Those questions have been received from Anthony Tassone. They equally are not here nor represented. So we'll move to questions 13 and 14 received from Julian Rukinski. And again, they are not represented. So that concludes the questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now move to officer reports, and there are a number of officer reports, 9 in fact, and 2 in closed council. So item 5.1 is the Central Registration Enrolment Scheme, fees and charges for non-early years managers. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I'll move the recommendation at item 5.1.
And I'll second that, and I invite you to speak to the motion.
And Chair, I'll just make some very brief comments around the recommendation. It is a procedural recommendation that is seeking our endorsement of an exemption of the non-early years managers from paying the Central Registration and Enrolment Scheme associated with the management of Casey's and Casey's early years management centres, and also our private sector providers in that sector. We're also seeking, or I should say the report is also seeking, an endorsement of a 50% reduction in the Central Registration Enrolment Scheme contribution fee for non-early year managers from 25-26. The context to this, Chair, is that Casey currently has 55 early learning centres under the management of the CRES scheme. 49 of those facilities are currently managed by council. There is a proposal, which we've discussed a number of times in the past, for 2 of those sites to be handed back to the Department of Education at the end of this year. There are 3 managed by 2 early year managers, and there are 3 additional facilities that are managed by not-for-profit small independent organisations, or what we classify under the purpose of this report as non-early year managers. Currently, the City of Casey was successful in receiving a grant to continue to enhance the Central Enrolment Scheme that has been, as I said, provided since 2005. This grant is provided annually, but it does not cover the full cost of operating the CRES program. The organisation has undergone an evaluation of the scheme, and the cost associated with it has included that the contribution fee is $103 per enrolment, and that would take into effect in 2025, notwithstanding that the feedback quite overwhelmingly from particularly the two early year managers and the two non-early year managers, or the three in early year managers are small not-for-profit organisations, that it would create a significant financial hardship to them if that was to be implemented and introduced in full. So the recommendation is to seek an exemption for this financial year and a further 50% reduction for subsequent financial years. The financial rationale and the analysis that is undertaken to support the recommendation has been thorough and comprehensive, as has been the outreach with the sector, and I'm satisfied with the recommendation and its accompanying justification, and I'm pleased to support it as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I also support this recommendation, and I do thank the officers for thinking through the issues here and coming back to Council and seeking this resolution. The Central Registration and Enrolment Scheme is a very important part of the program, allowing families in the community the best access to the most local preschool service within their area. And I think it is really important that Council support this. So further to that, the question of cost, it's a modest impost on Council's budget to make this change. And as I say, I do support the change, ensuring that the service continues and operates effectively, and it's a very important access point. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.2 is the gambling harm minimisation policy, and we're seeking to defer this matter. There's some further officer input that's going to be provided at the August meeting. So I seek a motion to defer this matter to the August 20th Council meeting. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I will move the deferment of item 5.2 to the August 2024 Council meeting.
And I'll second that, and I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.3 is the administrative update to the Hampton Park Central Community Precinct Master Plan. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I will move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and I'll second that motion, and I'll invite you to say a few words.
Chair, this is a procedural update to the Hampton Park Central Community Precinct Master Plan. Interested members of the community would be aware that this master plan was adopted by the Council in November 2019. It was to guide the short and the long-term redevelopment and renewal of the Council's assets that are currently located within the Hampton Park Central Community Precinct. At the time, the master plan was designed to be contingent on Council obtaining and securing existing funding, particularly through state government contributions. However, that has proved to not be successful. There hasn't been, over the period of time, a lack of financial commitments relevant and specific to this master plan, and because of that, it has now triggered an administrative update to revise the timelines and to revise the costings associated with the specific requirements within the concept master plan. Just to give a brief overview of the specific community precincts and the assets, it is 1.4 hectares of land contained within the broader Hampton Park Central area. We do, as I've said, call it the Hampton Park Central Community Precinct. It comprises currently of a number of community services, including the Hampton Park Library, the Hampton Park Youth Information Centre, the Hampton Park East Kindergarten, the Hampton Park Community House and the Arthur Wren Hall. The master plan devises over a number of stages, 3 initial stages plus future stages for all of those assets to be reviewed and to be upgraded. As I said, specifically contingent on obtaining external funding, and this is one of the critical elements of any master plan, is that whilst the Council will undertake an assessment to incorporate any update within the existing capital works budget, this particular master plan, because of its size and scale and the variety of assets individually and collectively that are contained within the precinct, it will require additional funding into the future. So this administrative update is to take in consideration the revised economic situation, the revised costings associated with meeting the objectives within the master plan, and also to ensure that the timelines from this point forward are realistic and revised accordingly because of, unfortunately, the lack, as I've said, of securing funding over the past 5 years. So it's a very small administrative update. Overall, the precinct master plan does provide significant guidance and quite exciting opportunities for the future use of the precinct, one which I would encourage anyone who is interested in the area and has an attachment to particularly using the facilities now and into the future to look at what the potential future uses actually consist of, and to work with future councils on ensuring that this vision can be realised accordingly with the obtainment of necessary funding. So I'm pleased to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I can't add to that at all. So thank you for that comprehensive overview, and I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4 is the 2024 to 2027 Land Use Strategy Work Plan. Can I have a mover?
Chair, I'll move the recommendation for item 5.4.
And I'll second that. And would you like to say a few words?
Chair, I'll just make some very brief comments. This is one of the 29 strategic services that is delivered by the council. The overall objective of this particular land use strategy, but particularly the work plan, which is included as the attachment to the council report, is to provide certainty and clarity over what the council's future directives around land use within the municipality, particularly as it looks to aspects regarding strategic land use planning, placemaking and revitalisation facilities related to urban regeneration, and development contribution management. So this is, again, a very important part of what council's activities and statutory roles are, and the policy or the strategy itself does provide detailed overview of what those specific requirements are, does provide the articulation of the strategic roles, the statutory roles, and emphasises that the necessity under the land use strategy is for council to do a number of things, particularly to regularly review the council planning scheme, to advocate to the Victorian Planning Authority on precinct structure plans and the infrastructure contribution plans prepared for the Victorian Planning Authority as it relates to Cathy's gross areas, and importantly, and this is a part of the overall strategy that we do discuss internally and through the council meeting a number of times, to adequately and appropriately manage development contributions, particularly the plans, the infrastructure contribution plans and the public open space contributions. So this is a very clear, very focused, very concise a strategy that again gives quite a detailed overview of the future direction of the council, the roles from a statutory perspective, but also ensuring that the associated work plan provides clarity over the deliverables, the expectations, and the relevant partnerships that are necessary to ensure that the vision, particularly around future land use, is realised. There's 5 things that are quite important within the work plan to note, Chair. And that is that over the next 3 years, from 2024 to 2027, the focus will be priority-led projects, which will include facilitate infrastructure delivery in the established and growth areas with partners, and that's the revitalisation of activity centres, one that we've just discussed in the previous agenda item. We will be implementing policy that will attract new investment to Casey. This is quite critical for generating economic activity, particularly as it relates to the creation of new jobs. There will be policy that will be implemented to protect Casey's environmental values and also to assess climate change risks. There will be an implementation of a policy to respond to Casey's adopted organisational priorities that will be addressing identified strategic risks and ensuring that maximum community benefit is delivered. And quite critically is the learning experience and the continual improvement process that is associated with this work plan to review and reform future policy to improve the customer experience and service efficiency. There is a number of project deliveries specifically contained within the work plan over the next 3 financial years. It's consistent with the endorsed budget that we adopted the last council meeting, and also our business planning over the next financial year and into the future. And of course, progress will be reported through our quarterly reports, through other other progress plans and updates that we provide to the community on a regular basis, and the review mechanisms to ensure that future budgets are commensurate and reflected upon the work plan to ensure that all of these objectives and projects are delivered adequately and within budget is, of course, an important component of the overall strategy. Having reviewed the strategy and the work plan, I commend the council officers for their detailed analysis in putting this together and ensuring that that transparent framework is communicated to the community so that the community has visibility over our priorities. And with the endorsement, which I am very pleased to do so under this item, I do wish the successful implementation of the strategy and the work plan accordingly.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And just to reinforce and underline the importance of this work plan and the council's adherence to it, to ensure that the resources are appropriately targeted, but more importantly, it demonstrates the time frame that many of these strategic projects have, many years of work, and very important outcomes for this community, particularly with respect to the growth areas. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.5 is a contract variation for the contract variation for curbside collection. Item 5.5. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I will move the recommendation.
I'll second that and invite you to speak to the motion.
Chair, this is an administrative recommendation that clearly, as it states, is to vary the contract associated with Casey's curbside collections to allow for costs associated with additional payroll tax surcharges or specifically the impost imposed by the state government. Specifically, these are two additional payroll taxes. One is the first is the mental health and wellbeing surcharge, which was introduced on the 1st of January 2022, and the second is the COVID-19 debt temporary payroll tax surcharge, which was introduced from 1 July 2023. The quantum of the contract, understandably, is substantial. Cleanaway, as the contract provider currently, quite rightly wrote to council to seek a variation to the contract because of the substantial cost impost imposed by these tax changes. It was a retrospective charge as a consequence of state government policy that in no way could have been foreshadowed when the original contract was negotiated. And reasonably, as I've said, Cleanaway have written to council to seek an adjustment or specifically a variation of the contract to incorporate those additional taxes as I have described. Having reviewed the confidential documents that Cleanaway has provided, and particularly the quantum of the financial disadvantagement associated with this tax impost, I am fully supportive of the variation that has been sought. And whilst it is with a degree of sadness to an extent that this ultimately will need to be passed on because of the state government's tax policy, it has to be seen through the lens, Chair, that we can't be in a situation of disadvantaging to a substantial commercial basis, in this case Cleanaway's existing contract. We want them to continue to provide a high level of service as they do to council, but notwithstanding is it needs to be in a competitive and equitable environment. And for those reasons, and having reviewed the submission, the evaluation of the variation and the justifications therein, I am fully supportive of the variation sought and the recommendation put.
I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.6 is the open space maintenance for the south area, tender assessment and contract awarding. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I will move the recommendation.
And I'll second that. And would you like to speak to the motion?
Chair, I'll speak very briefly. It is a substantial contract that has gone through a very high quality tender process, one again which has been provided through extensive confidential attachments which are redacted for the purpose of the public reports because of the commercial sensitivities contained within them, but I do provide a guarantee to the community that I have reviewed the documentation and the additional information provided at this briefing, and I'm satisfied that all probities, consistency with our procurement policies and good government and good commercial management, and in the best interests of providing a value-based outcome to the City of Casey and its residents, has been fully adhered to. The Open Space Maintenance South was advertised insofar as providing or seeking interest from submitters to 4 specific sub-regions: southeast, southwest, the sports ground surrounds and the roadside slashing. A total of 9 tenders were received and fully evaluated, and the contracts, the recommendation as a consequence of the tender process have been that the southeast contract would be awarded to Summit Open Space Services, the southwest contract will be awarded to Skyline Landscape Services, the sports ground surrounds will be awarded to Program Property Services, and the roadside slashing would be awarded to Munns Parks and Gardens Proprietary Limited. As I've said, I'm satisfied with the approach taken by the tender evaluation panel, particularly the composition of the panel and the adherence with all of our policies and stated requirements in this regard. All aspects around the financial implications have been considered in the 2024-2025 financial year budget, the allocation specifically for open space maintenance, and future operating considerations will be decided upon and will be reflected in future financial year budgets. So I thank the teams involved in conducting such a thorough tender evaluation to award these contracts. I congratulate those that have been recommended as successful awardees for the purposes of delivering these services, and I look forward to the organisation working with those contract awardees to deliver a high quality service in the best interest of the Casey community into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. I do want to pay tribute to the manager of this area, the Manager Infrastructure and Open Space, and her team for the work that's been done in thinking through how this tender is structured. Casey is a very, very large area with a lot of complicated open space, and the way that this has been thought through and put together, I think, is best practice exemplary. So I do want to pass on my appreciation. In saying that, the tender documentation that flows from that process is, of course, indeed quite complicated, and the outcome, I think, will ensure that the work that's been done, which has been in response to a contract that didn't proceed, and a process that has been really thinking through the feedback from the community and how we can best respond to that feedback as a council, I think is a very, very, very good piece of work. So thank you, Mr. Boardman, for your comments, and commendations to the staff, and I too support this recommendation. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.7 is the endorsement of organisational documents, and the recommendation is on page 79, and I seek a mover.
Chair, I will move the recommendation on page 79 as put.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman, and I'll second that and invite you to speak to your motion.
There is a number of components to this recommendation. Specifically, the recommendation is seeking adoption from us related to the public transparency policy, the rural drainage policy, the civic protocol policy, and the special charges policy. The further recommendation is seeking revocation of the residential development in coastal villages policy and the asset management policy, and furthermore is seeking for us to note the revised changes to the community engagement policy and to endorse this policy for a public exhibition period of 2 weeks, with a further report to be considered by us at the August 2024 council meeting. Details of the policy and the justification is contained within the public council papers, and I do not intend to go into any great lengths as to the reasons around the adoptions and the revocations. notwithstanding that there is a number of administrative changes required, particularly as it relates to the public transparency policy, the rural drainage policy, the civic protocol policy and the special charges policy. They are relatively minor in their outline, that they are meeting updated legislative requirements, changes in personnel here at the organisation, changes to standards associating with aspects of probability and simplification of the policy context. But having reviewed the justification around the changes, and as I've said, the particularly minor administrative nature of them, this is a quite straightforward procedural recommendation and one that I am pleased to accept. In relation to the revocation of the Residential Development Coastal Villages policy, this is something that goes back to 1982. It was last updated by Council in July 2002, so it is a policy that is over 40 years old, with nearly 20 or over 22 years since it was last adopted. The challenge associated with this particular policy is that it doesn't cover the township of Tooradin. It doesn't take into consideration the ongoing Victorian coastal management framework that we have spoken at previous council meetings and receiving ongoing briefings around. It doesn't acknowledge the role of Melbourne Water, and it also has a lack of contemporary applications that relates to land use and planning considerations in our coastal villages and coastal precinct. By saying that, it is one that is no longer fit for purpose, and the revocation in the context, considering that all elements within this policy have been superseded through other policies, both within the municipality but more so at a state level, certainly gives justification for its revocation and for its supplementation through those other policy aspects. The asset management policy is a straightforward revocation because we have changed our approach to asset management through the asset management strategy, which we adopted in 2022, which was a process that involved significant consultation through the Audit and Risk Committee, of which I am, of course, a member of, and with the CFO and with the finance team more broadly, to have a much more strategic way that we would identify, we would value, and we would manage our assets, contemporary with modern accounting and investment management principles. So again, this is a like-for-like swap based on a strategy that is much more responsive and specific in a more modern context. Finally, Chair, the community engagement policy again contains some very minor updates since the last endorsement in 2020. There's a number of those endorsements and changes which are contained on page 81 of the public council documents. The intention here is for this to go on public exhibition and for any feedback to be considered by the organisation before the final policy, which may incorporate any feedback received, is presented to us in August for further consideration and potential endorsement at that stage. So with those comments, Chair, as I said, this relatively is a straightforward piece of housekeeping, appropriate in the circumstances, quite overall relatively minor, and one which, as a consequence of our impending exiting from this organisation, it is good housekeeping for us to go through and continue to update our policy and other strategy settings accordingly.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'm glad you made note of the ongoing review. We have exhaustively reviewed all of the policies and procedures in the organisation, and I do thank the Manager, Communications and Corporate Governance for bringing these forward, reviewing them and ensuring that they are up to date. And as you've outlined, there are a number there that are very, very out of date, but they remain on Council's books. So happy to support your motion. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.8 is once again pretty straightforward. The change of the September Council meeting date, and that's in response to the changes in the caretaker period imposed on councils by the state government through the Local Government Act.
Chair, yes, I'll move the recommendation.
And I'll second that. Mr Boardman,
and Chair, very briefly, that when we adopted the council meeting dates in December last year, we could not have foreshadowed that the a Local Government Amendment Governance and Integrity Bill of 2024 would be introduced and now subsequently passed in Parliament, and that has triggered a statutory requirement for us to change the date of the September 2024 council meeting due to the caretaker provisions contained within the Local Government Amendment and Governance Integrity Bill. It's very straightforward, and I trust the committee understand our reasons and justification accordingly.
I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.9 is the CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee, and we note the commentary by our CEO having a general interest in this matter. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I move the recommendation as put.
And I second that. Do you want to speak to it, Mr.
Chair, I guess we also note, because the recommendation is appointing ourselves as members of the CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee. It's not, we just note that purely from a procedural basis. But this is a requirement under Section 45 of the Local Government Act, where this committee has understandably been in existence since we commenced our tenure, or I should say more specifically, we adopted the policy on the 14th of December, so we did this under the new Act. We did commence the previous membership of the committee with an independent chair as required under the Act on the 31st of December. The tenure of the former independent chair came to an expiration on the 30th of June. This required a small market process to determine market interest from a suitably qualified individual or organisation to form the role of the independent chair. There was 3 submissions received. I have reviewed the confidential attachments in detail around those submitters, and the recommendation to appoint Reading Consulting Group as the independent chair of the CEO Employment and Communication Committee, and to provide ongoing support for the committee's functions, of which myself, yourself, Chair, and also Mr Belmar will be members until the concluding of our term is understood and accepted. I'm fully satisfied with all probity, all declarations, the composition of the review committee and the justification attached to meeting the recommendation and the subsequent appointment of Reading Consulting Group. With those words, Chair, I look forward to working with Reading Consulting Group and yourself and Mr Belmar as members of the committee to implement the new committee and then to hand over the committee to incoming councillors accordingly once our tenure concludes.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 7 is petitions, and there were none received for the council meeting today. 8 is late reports. There are none. Item 9 is urgent business. There is none. Item 10 is closed council, and there are 2 closed items for this council meeting, being of a confidential nature. So I do want to say thank you to those who've persisted in the gallery this afternoon. Thank you for being here. And I formally close the meeting, and then we will close the meeting and consider the confidential items. Good afternoon.